Welcome to Ask the Hard Questions, Sabbath Message, January 24th, 2026, Season 1, Episode 15. Tonight isn't for people who want a softer God than the God who actually spoke. This is for people who are tired of being trained to call disobedience freedom and trained to call Yahweh's boundaries bondage. This is for people who notice the contradiction and refuse to lie to themselves to keep a Sunday routine. Here is the question that lights the fuse. If Yahweh blessed the seventh day and set it apart before Sinai, who gave Rome permission to replace it? If the Sabbath is a sign, a marker, a weekly boundary line of ownership, how did the church become the one place on earth where replacing it is treated as normal and keeping it is treated as extreme? This episode is not a debate. It's a record. It's a confrontation. Because the Sabbath isn't a Jewish topic. It's a creation topic. It's a covenant topic. It's a kingship topic. And you can tell who owns a person by what they do with Yahweh's holy time. If you can't stop, you're owned. If you have to reinterpret Yahweh to keep your schedule, you already chose your master. We are going to walk straight through the story. Sabbath before Paul, Sabbath under the king, and Sabbath after the later voice system tried to outprint the Messiah. We're going to expose how a quill can write anything, how a pulpit can bless anything, and how an empire can rename replacement tradition and call it holy. And we're going to ask the simplest question the Sunday system can't survive. Why does your gospel require Yahweh to contradict Yahweh? If you've ever felt that tension, if you've ever noticed how the church protects the calendar more than it protects the commandments, then you're in the right place. Because this is the line. Yahweh's sign or Rome's schedule, the king's authority or tradition's authority, obedience or comfort. Let's begin. Ask the hard questions. 3 costumes walk onto one stage, Evangelical, Protestant, Catholic, and they all bow to the same weekly confession, Rome's calendar over Yahweh's sign. They argue about candles, communion, popes, pastors, choirs, bands, and denominations. But they agree on the one thing that exposes ownership. The seventh-day Sabbath must be downgraded, spiritualized, postponed, or replaced. Because Sabbath is not just a day. Sabbath is a boundary line. Sabbath is a verdict. Rome did not invent Sabbath. Rome could not. Sabbath is older than Sinai, older than Israel's camp, older than the marketplace that demands a crowd every week. Sabbath is creation time, blessed time, set-apart time. And every system that sells comfort in sin must first do one thing: make God change so rebellion can feel righteous. If the people can be trained to believe Yahweh edits himself, then the people can be trained to edit Yahweh. So the story starts where Rome cannot touch it. Creation. Genesis 2:2-3, from the Hebrew. And God completed on the seventh day his work which he had done, and he ceased on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. And God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he ceased from all his work which God had created to do. The Hebrew verb shavat means to cease, to stop, not to slow down, not to take a break when convenient. He stopped. And the Hebrew verb kadash means to set apart as holy, not to make inspirational, not to make symbolic. He set the day apart. That is not Moses. That is not Sinai. That is not for Jews only. That is Yahweh planting holiness into time, before any nation existed, before any priesthood existed, before any temple existed. You don't outgrow a day Yahweh sanctified. You either treat it as holy, or you treat Yahweh as negotiable. Then the story moves from creation to covenant, because Yahweh doesn't just bless the day, he commands his people to guard it. Exodus 28:11, from the Hebrew, Remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to Yahweh your God. You shall not do any work, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, and your cattle, and your sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and he rested on the 7th day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. The Hebrew zachor means remember, as in keep it in view, do not let it slip out of your life. The Hebrew kadesh means sanctify, meaning you treat it as set apart in practice. The Hebrew melacha points to occupational work and service, Pharaoh's system of production, the machine that eats humans. Sabbath is Yahweh's weekly refusal of slavery. Then Yahweh tightens the claim. Sabbath is not only a command, it is a sign. Exodus 31:13. From the Hebrew, "Surely you shall keep my Sabbaths, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, so that you may know that I am Yahweh, who sanctifies you." The Hebrew shamar means keep, guard, watch. Not admire, not reinterpret. Guard it. And the Hebrew ot means sign, a marker that identifies whose you are. Sabbath is not merely rest. Sabbath is identity. It announces who sanctifies, Yahweh. It announces who defines holiness, Yahweh. It announces who owns time, Yahweh. And this is where the fight always begins, because if Satan can get a people to treat Yahweh's holy time as common time, he can get them to treat Yahweh's commands as optional suggestions. Once the sign is blurred, the covenant becomes a slogan. Once the day is replaced, obedience becomes legalism. Once obedience becomes legalism, lawlessness can be sold as grace. That is why the prophets speak about Sabbath like it is a lie detector, because it is. They don't treat it like private spirituality. They treat it like loyalty in public. Isaiah 56:1-2. From the Hebrew, "Keep justice and do righteousness. Blessed is the mortal who keeps the Sabbath from profaning it and keeps his hand from doing any evil." Justice and Sabbath stand together. That pairing alone exposes the modern fraud. People preach grace while despising Yahweh's justice. They preach faith while profaning Yahweh's sign. They sing about holiness while refusing the day Yahweh called holy. Isaiah 58:13-14. From the Hebrew, "If you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of Yahweh honorable, then you shall delight yourself in Yahweh, for the mouth of Yahweh has spoken." The Hebrew image is violent. You were trampling the day, and Yahweh says, "Turn your foot back." This is not a soft invitation to spiritual vibes. This is Yahweh calling out a people who treat his holy time like pavement. Jeremiah 17:21-22. From the Hebrew, "Guard yourselves, and do not carry any load on the Sabbath day, nor do any work, but keep the Sabbath day holy, as I commanded your fathers." Yahweh is not confused. Yahweh does not stutter. Yahweh does not say, "Keep it until Rome finds a better option." He says, "Keep it. Guard yourselves. Do not treat my day like a prophet day." And when people refuse, Yahweh does not call it growth. He calls it rebellion. Ezekiel 20:13-16. From the Hebrew, "They rebelled. My Sabbaths they greatly profaned. Their heart went after their idols." That's the pattern. Profane Sabbaths chase idols. It was true then, it is true now. Change the idol's clothing: money, power, nationalism, comfort, entertainment, sexual license, the applause of crowds. The result stays the same. A people that will not stop for Yahweh will stop for mammon. A people that will not guard Yahweh's sign will guard their weekend. A people that will not obey Yahweh will obey the market. So here is the charge that hangs over Rome and every church system that inherits Rome's calendar. What did God have to become for the empire to be right? He had to become mutable, double-minded, self-contradicting. He had to unhallow what he hallowed so a crowd could be gathered on the empire's preferred day. That is the setup. That is the bait. And now the king walks into the story and crushes the excuse. When Yeshua arrives, he does not treat Sabbath like a relic. He does not treat Sabbath like a Jewish inconvenience. He does not treat Sabbath like something waiting to be replaced by a later voice. He treats Sabbath like a battleground because Sabbath exposes the heart of the shepherds, and the shepherds were wolves. The wolves always do the same thing. They use religion to protect their power. Then they accuse obedience to keep the people dependent. They had turned Sabbath into a stage for control. Yeshua does not cancel Sabbath. He judges their abuse of it. He drags their cruelty into the light. Mark 2:27-28. From the Greek. The Sabbath came into being for the human, and not the human for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is master even of the Sabbath. The Koine Greek word sabbaton means Sabbath day. Not any day, not a general rest. The Koine Greek egeneto means came into being, became. Sabbath was made for the human, meaning Yahweh designed it as mercy and freedom, not as a whip for leaders. And the title word Kyrios means master, Lord, the one with authority. Yeshua claims authority over Sabbath. That claim cannot mean Sabbath is gone, because a master rules what exists. A master does not rule a void. So what does the master do? He exposes the heart that hides behind religion. Mark 3:4. From the Greek. Is it lawful on the Sabbaths to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill? The Koine Greek exestin means it is lawful, it is permitted. He forces them to say out loud what their religion had become, a system willing to harm while pretending to defend God. Yeshua is not breaking Sabbath. He is breaking their false authority. He is restoring Yahweh's day to Yahweh's intent, mercy, justice, life. And when they come for him harder, John records the tension. Not because Sabbath is meaningless, but because the leaders were murderous. John 5:17. From the Greek. My Father is working until now, and I am working. The Koine Greek verb here speaks of ongoing action. The point is not, therefore you can live in 7-day greed. The point is, Yahweh's mercy does not take a day off, and their accusation is a mask. They did not hate Sabbath breaking. They hated the king exposing them. They hated the light. Then Yeshua speaks words that destroy every later voice that tries to loosen obedience with religious language. Matthew 5:17-19. From the Greek. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fill to fullness. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one iota or one stroke shall pass from the law until all comes to be. Therefore, whoever loosens one of the least of these commandments and teaches humans thus will be called least in the kingdom of the heavens. But whoever does and teaches, this one will be called great. The Koine Greek katalisai means to abolish, to dismantle, to tear down. Yeshua says he did not come to dismantle. The Koine Greek plerosai means fill, bring to full measure, not cancel, not erase. Fill to fullness. Then he attacks the modern strategy, loosening commandments and teaching others to loosen. The Koine Greek lyse means loosen. That is the exact thing the Sunday system sells. Loosen the king's commands, then call it freedom, then call anyone who resists legalistic. Now anchor all of this to the sign of Jonah. The king's witness stands. Resurrection is not a license for later voices to rewrite Yahweh's boundaries. Resurrection is Yahweh's yes to the king's authority. That means any later voice that requires Yahweh to contradict Yahweh is not building faith. It is building permission. And now the motive shows its face. Sabbath interrupts the economy of the wolves. Sabbath interrupts the weekly money engine. Sabbath interrupts the performance schedule. Sabbath interrupts the empire's claim that your value equals your output. Sabbath interrupts the Sunday system's ability to gather the same crowd at the same time for the same sales pitch. That is why the argument never ends. It cannot end until people choose the king's authority over Yahweh's day or Rome's authority over the calendar. And that pushes the story into the final confrontation. After Yeshua, after the witness, after the sign, who gets to speak louder than the king? Who gets to replace what Yahweh called holy? After the sign of Jonah, you do not need new gospel architects. You do not need a second foundation. You do not need private vision authority to update Yahweh. A quill can write anything. A pulpit can bless anything. A crowd can be trained to call anything truth if the crowd is taught that ink outranks the king. That is the crisis. Later voices, written miracles, private visions, authority built on claims you cannot test, then sold as the real gospel, while the king's commands are treated as optional. So the question is not, can someone write another theory? Anyone can. The question is, who has authority to redraw Yahweh's sanctified time? This is where evangelicals, Protestants, and Catholics link arms without admitting it. They disagree about many things, but they share the weekly decision: Rome's day over Yahweh's day. They tell you Sabbath was holy, until it wasn't. They tell you Yahweh blessed the seventh day, until a later voice rebranded holiness. They tell you Yeshua is master, and then they treat his mastery as a metaphor that costs nothing. James will not allow that kind of faith. James 1:22. From the Greek, become doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. The Koine Greek poietai means doers, practitioners, not listeners with opinions. And the Koine Greek word for deceiving here carries the sense of misreasoning yourself into a lie. A religion that produces hearers only is not producing disciples. It is producing customers. James 2:12. From the Greek, so speak and so do, as through a law of freedom being about to be judged. The Koine Greek nomos is law, and the phrase law of freedom is not no law. It is the opposite. Law functioning as freedom. Freedom from sin, freedom from hypocrisy, freedom from self-worship. That is why Sabbath matters. Sabbath is freedom from Pharaoh's clock. Sabbath is freedom from the empire's demand. Sabbath is freedom that proves who you serve. Jude names the infiltration pattern the modern system still uses. Jude 1:4. From the Greek, certain humans slipped in secretly, transposing the grace of our God into licentiousness and denying our only Master and Lord, Jesus Christ. The Koine Greek idea behind slipped in is infiltration, entering alongside, unnoticed, then shifting the center. And transpose means move it, transfer it. Grace gets moved from mercy that leads to obedience into permission that leads to lawlessness. And the result is denial, not always with the mouth, but with the life. A person can say Lord and still deny him by refusing his commandments. Hebrews refuses the Sunday replacement story with one line that keeps standing no matter how loud the stage gets. Hebrews 4:9, from the Greek, "So then, there remains Sabbath keeping for the people of God." The Koine Greek sabbatismos means Sabbath keeping, Sabbath observance. Not Sunday, not a feeling, not spiritual rest only. There remains Sabbath keeping. And Revelation ends the debate by identifying the saints in the last conflict. Revelation 14:12, from the Greek, "Here is the endurance of the saints, the ones keeping the commandments of God and the faithfulness of Jesus." The Koine Greek terountes means keeping, guarding, observing. Saints are marked by guarded obedience. And faithfulness of Jesus is not a loophole to cancel commandments. It is the pattern, the King's own faithful loyalty. So here is the unavoidable conclusion. The Sabbath did not die. It was replaced. And replacement is not obedience. Replacement is a confession that Rome can redefine what Yahweh sanctified. Replacement is a confession that the marketplace can outrank the Creator. Replacement is a confession that tradition can silence the king. And the story ends where it must end. Not in debate, not in denominational fog, not in "we can all agree to disagree," but in a fork in the road. Yahweh's holy time or Rome's profitable time. The king's mastery over Sabbath or the empire's mastery over the calendar. Obedience that costs something, or a religion of slogans that costs nothing. Ask the hard questions. And that's where we end tonight, right where the line has always been drawn. Not in a denomination, not in a mood, not in a relationship slogan that costs nothing. We end at the boundary Yahweh blessed, the boundary Yahweh set apart, the boundary the empire had to replace to keep you comfortable and compliant. Because Sabbath is not a trivia topic. Sabbath is not a Jewish debate. Sabbath is the weekly confession of who owns you. It is the weekly refusal to bow to Pharaoh's production system. It is the weekly refusal to let Rome define holiness. It is the weekly refusal to let a later voice outspeak the king. And now you've heard the record. You've heard the creation root. You've heard the covenant language. You've heard the king claim mastery over the Sabbath. You've heard the witnesses call for doers, not hearers. You've heard that Sabbath keeping remains. You've heard that the saints are marked by guarding the commandments of God and the faithfulness of Jesus. There is no fog left. The only thing left is the choice. So don't leave this episode with adrenaline and no obedience. Don't let this become another hit of truth that you scroll past tomorrow while your life stays the same. The wolves love that. They love a crowd that claps for conviction and then goes right back to the same schedule, the same compromises, the same excuses, the same not under slogans that make rebellion feel spiritual. Here is what I'm asking you to do. Simple, direct, and costly. Stop letting the empire disciple your week. Stop letting convenience be your God. Stop letting tradition silence the king. Stop letting a marketplace rhythm replace Yahweh's sanctified time. If you say you belong to the Creator, then treat what He set apart as set apart. If you say Yeshua is master, then stop acting like the calendar is master. If you say you love God, then stop calling His boundaries bondage while calling Rome's replacement normal. And yes, people will pressure you. They will label you. They will mock you. They will say you're doing too much. They will pretend you're attacking them when all you're doing is refusing to lie. But that pressure is a revealer. It tells you how deep the spell goes. It tells you how trained they are to defend a schedule instead of defending Yahweh's word. It tells you how conditioned they are to treat obedience as dangerous and compromise as wise. So let the exposure do its work. Let the line be a line. Let the Sabbath be the weekly verdict against the idol of constant output, constant consumption, constant performance. Let it be your weekly no to Babylon. Let it be your weekly yes to Yahweh. Let it be the rhythm that retrains your mind, your body, your family, your household, your time, back under the kingship you claim with your mouth. Because the end of this isn't a new hobby. The end of this is not Sabbath culture. The end of this is allegiance. The end of this is separation. The end of this is truth in the bones. The end of this is a people who stop outsourcing holiness to a stage and start living it in daylight. If this episode hit you, don't just agree, act. Rebuild your week. Guard Yahweh's day. Test every later voice. Judge every tradition by the King's words. And if your entire religious world collapses because you refuse to break one command Yahweh called holy, then let it collapse. Better a collapsed lie than a polished captivity. We're not here to play nice with contradictions. We're here to tell the truth and live it. I love you all, and goodbye for today, and have a great new week. Happy Sabbath. Ask the hard questions.